Good day, good evening, good morning, whatever time zone you're in. Lovely that you're here with us, with our great guest today, Jason Shiers. And this is number 2. We're following on from last week's live, which was talking about sex, and Jason's going to be talking about recovery. So the two are not linked.
Different, yeah.
Not linked. But a really warm welcome to Jason. He's one of our esteemed and valued and welcomed speakers this year at Viva Goes Virtual, and will be joining us for a splash of Viva, which is we call it a pre-party party, but if you don't know Viva, maybe it makes more sense if we say pre-Viva party. It's just an evening on August the 6th. An invitation is extended with every early bird ticket bought, and we're hoping that we can give a mini taster of Viva. It'll have many of the elements condensed into one small and perfectly formed evening, and you come to a party, you don't even have to wear party gear. No prizes for party gear. But anyway, on with this morning's show, or today's show, and I'm going to hand you over to Sheila, who's going to say probably what I just said.
Exactly, you just said exactly what I was going to say, so you don't need to hand over to me at all. Let's hand over to Jason, because that's what people are here for. And, you know, Jason, we're really, really happy to have you as part of our Viva lineup for the big event and for the small event. You know, it's going to both of them equally lots of fun. We envisage, if our past Vivas have been anything to go by. And you were with us last year in Spain. Unfortunately, we can't do it in Spain this year. You know, we've got to do the online thing, but it's given us lots of access to, or people access to us online, which is great. So we'll have people streaming in from all over the world. Awesome. And today, we want to hear about recovery from yours perspective, because we know you've had a journey with recovery. So I'd love to hear about that.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me as well. Yeah. It's funny, the two topics, sex, it just sprung to mind. You know, when you were doing it, sex and recovery, I thought, wow, you know, like sex is something that's probably like one of the biggest topics in recovery, you know, but perhaps quite a different angle to Anne's talk for sure. Yeah, I was thinking about recovery, you know, and it's kind of like that, you know, I spent like over 2 decades in recovery, you know, as somebody with that identified as having a disease that was unexplainable, unfixable, permanent, lasting, and that I had to maintain, you know, practices and techniques, you know, just in order to be okay on a daily basis. You know, that was what recovery was to me. For a long time, and it's funny because like I suffered, you know, in my own recovery from my addiction, horrifically. I mean, recovery to me just meant that I wasn't taking drugs and alcohol anymore, you know, for which I've been abstinent for 26 years, you know, this year, like total abstinence from all chemicals. But you know, when I came out of the world of addiction, when I came out of the world of crime and organized crime and chaos and, you know, class A drug abuse and all that stuff, you know, like which had been in for a long time. It was quite funny to call something recovery, because it just wasn't I mean, what it really was not taking drugs and alcohol and chemicals, but indulging in every other way to be okay possible, you know, to including tools and techniques and psychological theories and therapies and practices, you know, that, as well as indulging in sex and gambling and love and money and shopping and shiny objects, you know, and anything else that would make me feel better. Because, you know, I was so caught up in my thinking about myself, you know, like that's the world that I live in. My daily way of living was just kind of like, you know, find an escape from these feelings that I'm having, with no idea of how my feelings were created, you know, just that they were really looked like an inherent disability that I had, you know, like this constant narrative running in my head that that created painful feelings, you know, and something that I needed to escape from. You know, it really looked like I had low self-worth. It really looked like that I would never amount to anything. It really looked like the past was a real representation of the present and the future, and it really looked like that there was never any hope for me to get better. And then for 2 decades, you know, or more, you know, more than 2 decades, I didn't question the fact that I was an addict, I had a disease of addiction, and that those were the ways I was going to cope, you know. And it was kind of like, I didn't question that, but I still tried to find help in any way possible, you know. And I think after 10 years, probably, or maybe about 8 years, you know, where it just got to this point where it was just so painful to be me, you know. And it was kind of like I was doing all these things what were suggested to me. And this isn't everyone's experience. I mean, the 12-step and recovery and the disease model of addiction saves millions of lives worldwide. You know, I don't want this to sound like an annihilation of that, because, you know, that's so much better than what it was. You know, I don't want it to, like, I came from a life of going to jail on a regular basis, committing crime, you know, stealing from anyone or anything that wasn't nailed down, living on the streets in homeless hostels. So like what I had in that recovery was, you know, on the outside, life got better, you know, externally things got better. I had a career, I had some friendships, you know, but my internal world, it's like that I didn't live a life of peace. You know, I've had this eternal searching of something that always, you know, I always had something inside me that sort of craved connection, craved feeling better, craved being present in life, but for whatever reason wasn't able to find that, you know, in all the things that I did. So I continued in that practice, and then I found, you know, after that amount of time, found therapy, started going to therapy, and thought, well, this must be it. This must be the thing that I'm not, you know, like I'm unwilling to look at the loss of my dad. My dad went out one day, got killed in an accident when I was 5, and I spent that lifetime telling that story as a victim of that. You know, this was why I was an addict. You know, this happened to me when I was a child, and then I spent my lifetime trying to escape from it in food, and then I found drugs and so on. That was kind of like the story that I told. But like, so it looked, you know, from what I got told, you know, going to therapy and desensitizing myself to the childhood experience, to the traumas that I had and so on, would free me from all the suffering that I had, you know. And so I spent 6 years training as a psychotherapist, you know, and that was a horrific, painful process, really. But apparently that was what I needed to do, you know, to become free of what I was struggling with. And, you know, I just used to cry. I mean, I used to cry, I used to curl up in a ball. I mean, I went through a horrific depression. You know, I had mental health diagnoses long before I started taking drugs. And when I trained as a therapist, it was like they wanted to send me off to get medication for depression. You know, I did end up on medication for anxiety. I couldn't fly without medication. And this is, I'd been flying for years before I started training as a therapist, and I was okay. But I never connected the fact that I'd spent weeks, week in, week out for a couple of years digging into trauma and talking about my childhood experience with the fact that I've now needed medication to get on a plane, or that I couldn't get out of bed in the morning because I just wanted to die. You know, I was full of suicidal thoughts. I never connected the two things. So I just pushed through it because I was a good recovering addict. You know, taking medication for depression was a definite no-no, you know. So it was kind of like I just thought, well, I'll just soldier on through, you know, and just went through real dark times. And I think, you know, I still feel sad at the thought of that, you know. And my daughter was little at the time, and I think that she was my little light, you know, my saving grace at the time when I went through that dark depression. I think because I'd lost my own dad as a small child, and it somehow looked to me that if she lost me, that she would relive my experience. And that was, you know, I mean, that was all made up. Like, I mean, that was the idea that I'd created in my mind about it, but somehow it saved me, you know, at the time. so yeah, I mean, it just felt like, I mean, that was it. I mean, I did everything. I did all the Tony Robbins, I've lost track of time here, but like I did all the Tony Robbins events. Um, I did the Hoffman process, landmark. I did everything I could. I trained in NLP, I trained in CBT. I spent 6 years training as a transactional analysis psychotherapist. Trained in person-centered counseling. I just did everything thinking that somehow, somewhere amongst all these things, that I would find this thing that I was looking for, you know. And meanwhile, doing that, going to recovery meetings, 12-step meetings, groups, things like that, and acting out, you know, on my own addictions and my own struggles with money and relationships and other things, and anything that I could to make myself feel better. And that was kind of how it almost became like a manageable process with a lot of pain, you know, in between, and a lot of suffering, a lot of struggles, and thinking that someday maybe I'll find the answer if I keep trying the right different type of therapy. And I remember after I went to Tony Robbins that I was pirating. I mean, I told Michael Neal this story, right? But I was pirating a video of a, I won't say where, but a well-known portal for videos, and there was one on there, Michael Neal video, and the only way I could pirate it was to watch it. So it's kind of like I had to screen record it, and for this group of people that I'd met at Tony Robbins, like a personal development group. And I just knew when I was listening to it that there was like, I couldn't tell what it was, but there was something in there that was really captivating me. And it was kind of, I just kept stopping my day and just sitting watching this video, because it was an 8-hour program thing that had run all day, and I kept screen recording it in little sections. And I just kept finding myself sitting. I had it running here on my desk on a laptop on the side of me, and I just kept thinking, something really interesting, but I just don't know what it is. I think that's what when we hear truth, when we hear something like that, it's kind of like there's I mean, Sid Banks always says that, you know, the information's in the feeling and not in the words, you know, and it's like, and I had a feeling, I was listening and I could feel like a real depth of interest and connection in what was being said, like there was some truth in it, but my intellect had no way of making sense of what it was. You know, I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't explain what it was. You know, and then for 6 months, it kept ruminating with me. You know, I kept remembering one of my friends bought me a Michael Neal book because I had told them about the experience of seeing the video and stuff, and it was an old one. It was a pre-principles book, you know, an NLP related book, and I thought, it didn't really sit, you know, it didn't really do anything for me. I just kind of read it and thought, but it's just stuck in my mind, this video. And I was going to LA for something, and I looked, and Michael had an event on 2 days after the event that I was going to. So I was just kind of like, oh, this is bizarre, you know. It's kind of like that this event's on at the same time, and literally 2 days I thought, go to LA, finish the event, I've got 2 days to myself, then I can go and spend 3 days with Michael Neal. I thought, it's just no brainer, I've got to do it, you know, for whatever reason. And bear in mind that my life at this time was like spinning plates, you know. It was like juggling balls. It was like relationships, money and weight loss, and relationships, you know. It was kind of like it was a combination of those big areas of life, of trying to make them feel better. And I remember going there and spending those 3 days with Michael and not really knowing what I heard, you know. And it was just a bizarre experience because I'd spent so long, you know, like training in the psychological world and sort of working with it. I mean, all this time I've been working with people with addictions as well as on a professional basis, and my own understanding evolving sort of flows with the clients that I work with. My own evolution of my own experience like changes the experience that I have with the clients. And you know, and I came out of those 3 days. I mean, 2 things significant, right? One was that Michael had said, I thought I knew everything about change. I thought I knew how change worked. I thought I knew that, you know, like, and I could assess what he was going to say for value, you know, pretty quickly. So I was kind of listening, and I was looking at the times, and we'd got there at 10 and we hadn't started on time, and we were sat around talking, and I'm thinking, this thing was expensive, man. And he's saying we've got 2 hours for dinner and we're only here for 7. That only leaves 5. And he's got 2 breaks as well. You know, that's kind of leaves us with about 3 hours. So dividing this amount of time up by the amount of days and the amount it cost, working out how much it would cost per hour, thinking, oh, this, like, I can't be getting enough value out of this for the cost, you know, that it has cost me. And I had my notebook out, you know, to take all the notes so I could remember everything and see if it was right. And I just remember that asking a question, and Michael had said, hey, can you like put the book down and just like be here, you know, and stop like seeing if this is right or wrong, or if this is like something, you know, or like something you've done before, or whether you'll get your money's worth or not, you know. And for whatever reason, you know, it's kind of like in that moment, I just said, okay, you know, and I put the book down and I just kind of like sat there. And I care. And at the end of it, you know, I was sat outside this Airbnb and there was just this beautiful green valley at the back and a little rope swing. And I was just sat there just feeling like at real peace. And I just thought, wow, it's kind of like I just woke up out of a bad dream, you know, or something like that. Like I've come out of a nightmare, and isn't nature beautiful and all this, you know. And I was just kind of sat there, and then I started thinking, well, you know, I haven't got a new relationship and my bank balance hasn't tripled while I've been here, haven't lost weight, you know, business hasn't changed, you know. And it was kind of like just and then dominoes from there, you know, just started falling with realizations of like, well, so if those things are not really my problem, because that's how it had looked, you know, my life looked like a circumstantial management and thought management process, you know, in that recovery period that I'd had before. It was all of a sudden where I'd come to the point of realization that recovery was not about getting the right balance of things or the right balance of money or the right relationship or the right weight loss or a thought management process either. You know, the fact that I wasn't my thinking, I didn't have a low self-worth, I didn't need more confidence, I didn't need all these things in order to be okay. I already was, you know, that was my innate, you know, being. That's who I was. That was the essence of who I was, you know. And I just had a momentary experience of seeing that, and then from then, like, it was just kind of like a really cool journey of creativity and exploration and realization, you know, where the dominoes about all the things that look solid for so long that I'd struggled with, you know, had fallen and or fallen one by one, you know, in realizations, the realizations about trauma, the realizations about not being a victim, the realizations of calling myself an addict for 2 decades, thinking I need to practice prayer and meditation in a, you know, a certain way. And I had to attend meetings, you know, I had to give myself a label, you know, in order just to make sure I didn't relapse and go back to the life that I lived before. You know, that fell away straight away. That just disappeared. I mean, literally from there, I just thought that's definitely not true. I just knew. And one more thing, you know, even that weekend, I knew about my practice as a therapist. You know, I kind of knew that I couldn't do it anymore. You know, I just knew. I remember thinking while I was there in LA at his house, I remember thinking, I just can't do that anymore. You know, it just doesn't make sense to me to do that. And I remember saying, I can't do that anymore, but I don't know what I can do. I don't know how to work with people, you know. So, you know, since then I've been in Super Coach twice. And I spent a year doing a mentoring program with Bill Pettit as well. And yeah, the difference in working with my clients, you know, is kind of like, it's just so magical, you know, like just being able to have people come desperate in the state that I was in, you know, like for many years, and see life change pretty quickly in just a few sessions, you know. And I don't need to say, I always say, you know, when you get a builder coming around and you say, oh, can you do this job for me? And they go, you know, it's going to be expensive, right? Well, that was kind of like the therapy process. You know, someone come in and they'd tell you about it and you'd go, going to take a couple of years, that, you know, a couple of years of coming to therapy, and not in that real lighthearted way, but like, you know, in a more serious way, you know, it's going to take a couple of years. Whereas now it's kind of like, well, things change really quickly for people when they wake up to the truth of who they are, when they see beyond their thinking about themselves, you know, and they start to get a glimpse of that. I mean, what I've noticed is all people need is that little glimpse of the made up nature of our reality, of how our thinking creates our suffering, you know, to start being curious about how it all works, you know, as I was. And that's such a magical job to have, you know, to work with people in that way, you know. And I'm doing all sorts of creative stuff with addictions and working with people at the moment, which is really exciting, and you know, and I feel strongly about. So yeah, I mean, if you've got any questions, or if anyone's got any questions, I'd love to give them a go.
I was gonna say, I hope you can't hear the banging in the background with all the builders are off again. But I don't have any questions right now, Jason. But I haven't heard your full story before, and I bet that isn't the full story. But thank you for being so honest and sharing that with all of us here on Facebook. It has been a huge journey for you, obviously, and to hear how quickly it changed. That's what impacted me most in your story, that you heard something when you went to see Michael that took away that label of 20 years. That's just, that's gold, right? That's magic. That's what it feels like. It's suddenly, because people die with those labels, still stuck on them, if you like. And for you to see through that and have so much relief in such a short period of time, it's amazing, really amazing.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because after doing recovery meetings like every week, for 2 decades, it's kind of like, and then just realizing I'm not an addict. It's just a concept. It's just an idea, and and it's like, and I don't have to go to meetings just to be okay, And it was kind of like, and I had friends that were like, there was a standing joke amongst friends in meetings that say, oh, people that no longer say they're an addict and stop going to meetings, they all die, or it's kind of like, that was, it was like a, not funny, but like a laughable thing, like, oh, he's not an addict anymore, like people said in sarcastic, in that sarcastic way, so I then faced that, when my friends like, oh, you're not an addict anymore, it's kind of like, yeah, we know what happens, it's kind of like, so can you drink and use drugs anymore, can you drink and use drugs now again? And to me, in my wisdom, just doesn't seem like a good idea to do that. I mean, it's simple. I've got access to that. I don't need to identify as something. And I think what I realized, I had an insight about, was that people go to meetings and their mind gets quiet in the meeting, and they have a good feeling. They sit in a nice feeling. They experience connection, because when they're out of their own thinking, they hear the vulnerability, they feel, they relive their own experience in hearing someone else share, and they feel good, right? And it's kind of, and they leave the meeting, they go, oh, that was a great meeting, it felt really good. It's obvious why I go to meetings, because I get to feel good when I go there. They don't see the fact that they've got a quiet mind in the meeting is the reason for the good feeling. It's nothing to do with the meeting. They think that they have to keep going back there to experience that feeling, but like, what's on offer is like, that feeling's available at all times,
That's such a powerful, hopeful, and simple, I think, explanation that you came across through your own experience. It's just what you used the word captivated, and I'm captivated now. But I do have a question, actually, from one of our listeners. I feel like a radio host. So Dawn's asking, Jason, what do you feel is the best way to talk about the understanding with others who are still in recovery and suffering?
I have to say that I definitely don't have a best way, and for me, going into every conversation knowing that the person I'm speaking to is as innately healthy as I am and has inside of them exactly what I have, like without a doubt, like no doubt, it's kind of like the foundation of me speaking to anyone, regardless of that. And there isn't a a right way for me. You know, it's kind of like, it's literally, you know, I have conversations with different people, you know, people that are, whether it's someone who's suffered from a lifetime of anxiety or people in recovery that are still struggling, you know, like with 12-step approach and psychological therapies and processes and things like that, that literally just show up and see where the conversation goes, you know, and something will make sense to me at the time. I mean, listening, that knowing and that ability to listen with nothing on my mind, just to be present and trusting that the right thing to say will come through to me at the time is the way that I show up to my calls with people, you know, like that's been what's worked the best. You know, any idea that I have about the best way to do it is usually, you know, the last thing that I would suggest to anyone, you know.
Me too.
That in itself is so refreshing, because it just out of the window goes all ideas, because how can you have something in the moment that you've already taken in to that moment with you? It doesn't make sense, does it?
Yeah, I mean, like that sparked something in me, you know, about the unknown, you know, and it was kind of like the realization that the unknown is a real exciting place to live, you know, is like really cool, and all good things happen there, you know, in the unknown. And the fact that I craved and chased the idea of certainty in recovery, you know, it's kind of like that. I thought that if I just continued to do the things that were suggested to me, that somehow I would get this thing that was available to me somewhere else other than here, you know, this feeling that I was you know, whether it was a feeling or a status or an amount of money or a weight loss or a relationship change or something, you know, it always looked like it was available somewhere other than here, you know. And like, by realizing that all of life is uncertain, you know, and that actually that's, you know, and nothing can go wrong, because all the time it kind of looked like that everything had been disastrous and everything had gone wrong, and I was trying to move away from that, but actually realizing that nothing can go wrong. It's my ideas about what's happening that make me feel like everything's going wrong. You know, it's created in my thinking about circumstances. That's not the actual circumstances. And that, you know, living in the unknown was just the funnest experience, you know, the most connecting, the most rewarding, sort of exciting way to wake up every day, was thinking, well, I don't know what's going to happen today and nothing can go wrong, you know. So it's kind of like, I mean, it's like, cool, what's next, you know?
Yeah. It makes me think in a way that it's going back to a time where we didn't even have to let the ideas go. We hadn't had those ideas yet. Like, you wake up at 3 years old or 4 years old and it's like, oh, I'm awake. Yeah, there's no concept of certainty or uncertainty, and that's beautiful. And your story is captivating. Is the word that's come for me.
Well, I feel like we've delivered a little bit of love today with our Viva love notes, as we've called them, you know, and we've gone on for half an hour. So I think, just in terms of the snippet that we wanted to share with people, I mean, we could go on for quite a long time here, I think, and we will be talking more with Jason at Viva and at a splash of Viva for sure in August. So thanks, Jason, for giving us your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Wonderful. And your work is not going to be done for quite some time, but let's hail the day when you're out of business.
You're out of business. Yeah, that'd be a good day.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for being with us on Facebook Live. I can see there's been a couple of watch parties going on, so that's amazing. Thank you, Amanda O'Shea, for hosting a watch party, and I guess you did one, Sue, did you?
I did.
Thank you, Sue. I'm not quite that technically inclined yet. One day I will. Thanks, everybody, for being with us. We'll see you on the next one. We got another one. Is it on Thursday? So I think it is, with Hannah.
Yes.
Yes. Another one to do. So we'll see you on Thursday. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.